want to welcome you here. We've got a wonderful teaching this week, a wonderful reading, rather. The teaching, I'll let you decide whether that's wonderful or not. I love when we get to the end of a Torah reading, and to the end of a book of the Torah, because it's been said for thousands of years, this tradition that Julio expounded on a little bit earlier, the chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and let us be strengthened. I want to give you a little bit more detail on this, because it does, I feel, tie very well with the end of the book of Leviticus. This tradition is handed down by the Ashkenazi, which is the European Jews, versus the Sephardic, which is like my brother Israel over here. Okay. I do like the Sephardic tradition that they will do a version of this. They will repeat at the end of every Torah reading each week. The Sephardic will traditionally say, Chazak berecha, or be strong and be blessed. And the tradition stems from many areas, but the main reason behind this is because of that word chazak and its various meanings. He said, today when Israel was explaining this, he said, why are we to be strong in obeying the commandments? True, but it goes even further than that. Chazak is a Hebrew word that is in the Torah, even though the phrase is not necessarily there. It is, if you really want to write down the numbers and do your own studies, the Strong's number for this is Hebrew H2388. And I'm not going to give you the full Brown, Drivers, and Briggs definition because we'd be here all day, and I'm really trying not to do that to you. But I will abbreviate this. Chazak means to be bound to be attached to support, to preserve, to be strong in or strengthened by, to be courageous, to conquer, to hold fast, to encourage, to retain, to keep, to prove helpful, or to uphold. I feel like this tradition of repeating this phrase, even though it's just taking that one word and repeating it 3 times with a slight variation at the end. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong. Be strong. Let us be strengthened by what we've just read, but not just that. But let us be strengthened by the very fact that we are here together, reading the Word of God, studying the Torah, and doing our best as a community to walk in His ways. The phrase ties in very well with our reading, because what I want to focus on today is a section in Leviticus 26. Start with verse 6 and go through verse 8 right now. It's very clear to us throughout the entire readings, not just in this week's portion, but every portion that we read, that it is never the intention of God that we walk this walk alone. I've seen many people over the years that when they realize that they need to study the Torah, they'll seclude themselves and stay in their homes, and that doesn't very often work out well for these people. It's intended that we come together, that we study and have someone to bounce our studies off of, to bring it to the community, to have someone who is anointed by God to stand over us and confirm what we've already been studying throughout the week. It's not intended for you to take these wonderful words that have been written down millennia ago and chew them up and come up with our own wild ideas about what it's supposed to be and just say, that's the way it is, that's the way I believe it, and you're not going to be able to tell me anything about it. But bringing this back to the chazak, Leviticus 26:6 says, I will give peace in the land. You shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. I will cause evil beasts to cease out of the land, and neither shall the sword go through your land. And you shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. And 5 of you shall chase 100, 100 of you shall put 10,000 to flight, and your enemies shall fall by the sword in front of you. Excuse me, 1 second. Now, there's a couple of things that we have to look at here, because either we've made some huge mistakes in teaching mathematics to our children over the last couple of thousand years, or God is perfect in everything except multiplication, because the math doesn't add up. Rabbis have studied this for millennia and just said plainly, it doesn't work. 5 chasing 100, but 100 chasing 10,000, there's no equation that you can do that will come up with that. So what do we do with this? The point of the matter to me is that he is explaining to us the power of community. You know, there is an exponential benefit that will occur when the body of Messiah comes together and works together. That's one of the things I love about the Hebraic roots movement, if you want to call it that, or the Messianic movement, if you want to call it that. But it seems like there is such a blurring of denominational boundaries when people see a realization of Torah. I have been in congregations where there are Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, Pentecostals, people that normally would not be able to stand each other sitting under the same roof. Even ex-Catholics have been involved. And it's a blessing when you see these congregations come together and work together and accomplish amazing things for the body of Messiah. So how does this work? How does this tie for us as believers today? How does it work in your lives? I believe Matthew has written down the words of Messiah in chapter 18, verse 20, as he kind of gives us an idea that this is a good thing for him to bring the body together. He says, in 18:20, he says, "For where there are 2 or 3 gathered together in my name, there I am in their midst." You know, this is not an unfamiliar scripture. It's not an unfamiliar concept that he works in his people when we are together and we have the same mind, the same heart on a matter. In Acts chapter 2, the Spirit is given when they are in the same place in the upper room with one mind and one Spirit, and the Spirit comes down. And there are 3,000 men that are added to the kingdom of heaven that day because of that agreement. Does that not reflect what has been talked about in Leviticus 26? You know, that 5 of us will chase. I mean, there were 12 guys, and they brought 3,000 men who were adamant. How do I put this? They are just straightforward, Torah-observant Jews coming back for the Feast of Shavuot at the Pilgrimage Festival to do what they're supposed to do. And they hear all these voices. And these voices are, wait a minute, I'm from this country, but this guy's teaching in my language, but he's from Galilee. How's he teaching in my language? And then they step up and say, it's not what you think. They're not drunk. They're teaching you with new wine from the Spirit. And the power of God is working in these men because they were praying together, working together in one mind and one accord. And the people of God have always been brought together from the very beginning with Abraham. As he's leaving out of Ur to go and find whatever land God is trying to give to him, what happens? His nephew goes with him. And they come out, and then they have an opportunity to perform a service after they've had their separation and Lot's gone over to Sodom and Gomorrah, and then they've had that whole battle with the kings to gain the people back. And then you have the opportunity with Abraham to give tithes to the king of peace, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, which is king of Shalom, king of peace. And we are called as people of God, according to Paul, to be in that priesthood after the order of that king, the kingly priesthood of Melchizedek, which is, of course, a representation of Messiah in the Old Testament. So we see all these different aspects of the life of believers and how it works together when they are working together, and how the power of God can really work in your lives. We've had a lot of situations where there are needs in a group. We see holes. We see places where your ministry is lacking. And I really am saddened by this. There's been a situation, a trend in the religious world that I've heard about for probably 30 or more years, where you've got 80% of the work that's done by 20% of the congregation. And I'm sure all of you have heard this before. And it saddens me because so many times there's people that just come and they want to receive what the Father has for them that day, and then go home, go about and try to do, very possibly going out and just doing what you can to be Torah observant in your life, but there's still those holes, still those things that are missing. It's very pleasing to me to see my brothers and my sister that have come up here today. I had no idea that we were going to have new members added in, and it just blessed my heart to see that happen, because we just come back from our family retreat this past weekend, and it seems that there's a blossoming theme of community that's been being brought out here at VOV. I had no idea that was the theme of the retreat. I had no idea when I started studying this Torah portion, a month ago, that the Father was going to lead me down this path. And believe it or not, I even tried to get away from going down this path. But, sometimes, actually, no, you always want to follow what the Father has to say, because He's always going to lead you where you need to go. But in the situation of the works in the community, it isn't a congregation that we're trying to build here. It's not a congregation where you just go, to use Christian terminology, if I don't offend anyone by doing that, the building isn't the church. You've heard it preached as long as you've been going to churches. As long as you've been going to any type of congregation, you've heard it preached, the building isn't the congregation, the building isn't the community, the building isn't the church. You are. You're the ones that make up the body of Messiah, not this brick and mortar and sheetrock and electricity. It's nothing to do with that. It has to do with the people that are here with you. And it was mentioned to me years ago when I brought a missing part of our congregation to our Pentecostal holiness pastor. He said, well, maybe God showed you that missing part so that you could fill it. It's not a situation of, I'm going to tell you what I see a problem so that you can fix it. At our old congregation, we had a rule in our board meetings: if you bring a problem to the board, you bring the solution. And so that's a hard rule to follow sometimes, but that seems to be the way God would work. I mean, look at, let me back up a minute, but when it comes to these places, I've heard all the excuses you could imagine. I've heard them all. There's, that's not my area of calling. That's not where I'm comfortable. Somebody else can do that one. I'm reminded of a song that I hear on the radio. I cannot remember the artist. It just came to my mind today. But the artist here sees all these problems going on in the world. People starving over in Africa, well water that's not any good, or river water that they're using that's toxic to them, and people in bondage and slavery in the whole slave trade that's been hitting the news so heavily. And in the song, he screams to God, why don't you do something? And God's reply was, I did. I created you. So looking at that, it may not be something as big as ending, the slave trade in the world, but could teaching our youth be where God's going to use you? Could going out and being an evangelist to the people of Greensboro be where God's going to lead you? Could it be that you have a talent that you're hiding from the congregation because you're uncomfortable Well, it's not about you. It's about the body of Messiah. It's about doing what he has prepared you to do, whether you know you're being prepared to do it or not. And when thinking about all these excuses and reasons that people give for not working, I think of David. What if he had walked out into that battlefield and said, I'm a teenager. This guy is 14 feet tall, 15 feet tall, however tall Goliath was. And we've got an army here that are trained in weapons of warfare, trained in battle tactics, familiar with the armor that they would be wearing. Somebody else can go fight him. Imagine how different history would have been for the state of Israel. What was God doing with that little teenager who wasn't even close to age for military combat when he said, if nobody else is going to do this, I'm going to do it because I'm not going to let that pagan Philistine stand up here and curse the name of my God. What was he doing? He was setting up the prophetic line that would bring forth our Messiah through the bloodline of the kings of Israel. He was bringing it about. All the way back then, he was fulfilling prophecy. Now, you may not believe this. I know at least one does because I heard him saying something about it while we were doing our reading. But our Haftarah reading in Jeremiah has a prophecy that is being fulfilled in our lives every single day. And it's been fulfilled in yours already. In Jeremiah 16:19, it says, O Lord, my strength and my fortress, my refuge in the day of affliction. The nations shall come to you from the ends of the earth and say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and there is no profit in them. Did you have that aha moment at any point in your life? Of course you did. If you didn't, you wouldn't be here. Because, I had never read the book of Jeremiah when this passage was read the first time I went through the Torah. I will never forget that day. I was sitting at a congregation in Statesville. I had actually been helping them run the sound that day. And as I was sitting back there and they read that, I just uncontrollably, it's like the Father pricked my heart and said, this was you. I'd never read the book of Jeremiah because, I'd always heard him called the weeping prophet. I don't want to read about a bunch of whining. I want something that's going to lift me up. It's going to encourage me. I don't want to hear all the problems that are going to come. Our Torah portion is filled with problems today of what's going to happen if you decide not to follow the will of God. I like how God shows us the exponential benefit of a group of believers working together. 5 of you will chase 100. 100 of you will chase 10,000. And then he shows the exponential detriment if you decide not to follow him. He said, if you don't follow my will and my ways, this is going to happen. And if you still won't follow me, then it's going to get worse. And if you still won't follow me, it's going to continue to get worse. And it continues to worsen and worsen and worsen. So my question, just like Joshua set forth before the people as they were getting ready to go and take Jericho, I set before you today life and death. Choose today whom you're going to serve. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Well, to serve the Lord does not mean you just come in and warm up your chair and listen. Now, I'm preaching to the choir in a lot of ways. I know that. But this is what the Father's laid on my heart today. I really feel like that it's going to be good for somebody. Even if you're coming in and you've already joined, you're already a member, but you heard the proclamation this morning. You're going to support this congregation with your, and I don't remember it all, and Pastor took his clipboard, but with your tithes, with your time, and with your gifts. I'm not up here about your tithes. That's something for later times. But your time and your gifts, what does that mean? How does that work? It means that when your heart is pricked about a certain area, that you make an action. Yeshua was a man who confounded the rabbis a lot. And I don't know if you know much about Rabbinic Judaism, but basically, if a rabbi has been written down in the the Talmud that this is what this rabbi says, or in the Pirkei Avot, the sayings of our fathers. This is pretty close to doctrine for them. You're not going to really go against a rabbi. And Yeshua didn't do that a lot, but the one I'm referring to is Rabbi Hillel, which was just a few years before Yeshua's time. Rabbi Hillel made a statement that you can read in the Talmud, and I don't have the tractate number or anything like that, but he said that you should not treat a man in such a way that you would not want him to treat you. Thank you. So, Shabbat 39a. You can read that there. And then you look at what Yeshua said. And he says, you should treat others the way that you would want them to treat you. I can sit over here on this pew, on this bench, chair, whatever you want to call it, and never bother anybody. And never treat anybody in such a way that I wouldn't want them to treat me. Because I'm a solitary person. I'm a little conflicted. I like to be around a lot of people, but I also like my time to myself. I'd be perfectly happy with my Torah and sitting back and just studying and reading and never be bothered. But Yeshua puts a command of action to what Rabbi Hillel has taught. He says, you go and you do for everyone else the way that you would want them to treat you. So, if you go home and maybe you have a child and you feel like that child's not being properly taken care of at VOB or at wherever else that you make your home congregation if you're visiting here, maybe you see that and you say, well, these other people have kids my child's age. They need something for them. Maybe it's God calling you to step up and maybe not necessarily teach, but maybe help to organize something for that age group. If you see a hole or maybe somebody's getting burnt out in one particular ministry because they're having to do it constantly, all the time, every week, every day, they're focused on this one ministry, step in and help. I don't know how many of you know this or not, but at Valley of Blessing, we have leadership teams. We have ministry teams. These teams, we have leaders, we have secondary leaders, and we have workers. A lot of these teams have spots that aren't filled. If God's pricking your heart today, get with one of the leaders. If we can't get it to you today, we'll get it to you within a few days. The list of leadership teams. And pray about it. And see where God wants to put you. Matthew 9, verse 37-38. Yeshua was talking to his disciples, and he tells them, he says, and he said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray to the Lord of the harvest that he will send out laborers into his harvest. I mean, it is the will of God that his children work. Yes, redemption is a free gift. There's no question about that. Salvation comes over time through redemption. Because I tell you what, I'm not perfect. I'm not willing to say I am saved. I'm willing to say I'm being saved. Because I can still make mistakes. But the point is, a free gift is freely given. But then, because we've had that free gift, because he was willing to step into our place and be that redemptive power, is it not better for us to step forward and say, I will work because he has done so many things for me? The simple fact that he did that, a lot of times many of us have been, we've had that revelation of redemption, decades ago. But it seems to have a mentality of, what have you done for me lately, God? Well, I go back to Jeremiah again. Did he not fulfill prophecy in your life? Does he not constantly fulfill prophecy in our lives? Every day. It may not be the same prophecy for you every single day, but you can look around when you have somebody new come in the building and say, you know, I don't know why, but I just feel like there's something more, and I want to know about it. And when I did some research online, I found your website. Well, they've come here to fulfill prophecy. It is a constant revelation that God is still working in this world today. He's not taking his hands off. So why should you take your hands off and say, VOB is being run, they're doing a fine job, I don't need to do anything, but sit back, relax, and take it all in. That's not what he's called us to. It's not what he's called you to. He's called you to stand in the gap. He's called you to be strong. 5 of you shall chase 100. 100 of you shall put 10,000 to flight. And your enemies shall fall by the sword in front of you. A community is so much more than a congregation. A community is all the ugly truth about every person in here. We have everybody from the Wall Street, stock market exchange, however you say it, the guy who does all the trading there, all the way down to the homeless man on the corner that might darken the doors in here. And it's up to you as the body of VOB, as the body of believers, as the body of Messiah, to be that voice for Messiah in here. Say, I can't do it. I'm not trained in anything. I haven't had any classes in teaching. I haven't had any music training. I haven't had any oration lessons. Okay. Can you shake a hand and say Shabbat Shalom? Can you say, God bless you for coming? We feel amazing that you're here. Can you, are you good at math? Can you help out with the accounting? Can you change a light bulb? I mean, these are the things that make a congregation run. What makes a community run? I want to go to Colossians 3. Starting in verse 12. It says, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against each other, even as Messiah forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which you also were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Messiah dwell in you, richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another, in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to Adonai. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do all in the name of Yeshua the Messiah, giving thanks to God the Father through him. That's community. That is community. Yes, there are times when you have to admonish one another. Yes, there are times when it's uncomfortable. But first and foremost, putting on the love of Messiah. That's how community works. You cannot admonish someone out of anger or hatred. Someone's done something wrong to you. You can't go to them and say, you did this and I'm angry with you and I'm going to take you to the board. No. If you've got that, excuse me, if you've got that mentality, I challenge you to read Matthew 18. Because it tells you the proper way to go through arguments among the body. But we're not going to do that today. But I will say, if you love one another and bring admonishment through the Spirit and through the Torah in the right way, you will restore the community. I want to look back at the definition for chazak, because that's where we started. And that's what the whole idea of this is to strengthen the body, to strengthen this community. And I want you to think about what your contributions could be. I mean, we've been through one example of 3 people joining up with VOB today and saying, I'm going to stand in the gap. If there's something that's been holding you back, then I'm going to give you the idea of what's required. And we have a sheet on the cork board back here. It just goes sign up on the bulletin board. It's they may do it differently one time to the next, but when I went through my membership class, it was 4 classes. I believe we did it during Torah Talk. Sometimes they do it on Sunday. They'll work out around your schedule. So that's not too difficult. And after that, if you still, you learn a little bit about VOB's beliefs and about the Messianic walk. And then you say, yeah, I want to join. And then as long as everybody on the board has no problem with you, which I haven't got a problem with anybody in here. Not that I'm on the board, but you can talk to John about that later. But we have no problem bringing you into the family, bringing you into the fold. And then we want to get you signed up on that leadership team. On the ministry team. Yeah. No, but seriously, I want you to think about it, because I would love to have a situation where when this small community of VOB, this small community chasing 100 of the enemy away would be awesome. But imagine if we had everybody in this community on board. The greatest fear the enemy has is laid out in the book of Revelation, and I wish I had written down this reference because the Father just brought the verse to my mind. But it says, it's when the woman with child is hidden in the hills, and the enemy wants to fight, but the earth opens up and sends a flood to stop the enemy from reaching her. So what does he do? What does the enemy do? He turns on the next greatest fear he has, and that is the believers who have the testimony of Yeshua the Messiah and walk in the commandments of God. Guys, if that doesn't explain VOB or any other Messianic congregation out there, I don't know what does. We are the greatest thorn in the enemy's side. And this small group could chase tens of thousands of demons out of Greensboro if we were working together and strengthening the body as we should. It can be done. It's not hard because everybody lifts a little bit more. Everybody carries a little bit more of the weight. So think about it. I'm going to read the definitions again of chazak. And I want you to not only think about what the Torah can do to strengthen you in your life, but what can you do looking at these definitions to strengthen VOB. Chazak means to be bound to be attached to support, to preserve, to be strong or strengthen, to be courageous, to conquer, to hold fast, to encourage, to retain, to keep, to prove helpful, and to uphold. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and let us be strengthened. In the Torah, in the community, and in each other.